Hello and welcome to 18 WJTS Inform. Joining us in the studio is State Senator Mark Messmer, representing District 48, and he stops in on Friday evenings to talk about what has happened in legislation this week. But today, we're going to kind of wrap up what's happened in the first half of the session, as these are bills that have moved from the Senate and will be now in the House, starting to be heard next week in committees. Okay.
Yep.
Welcome to the show.
Great to be here as always. So Wednesday this week we wrapped up our first half of session. We had 636 Senate bills filed, and out of those 636 filed, 218 moved on to the House. So 2/3 of those bills just didn't get dealt with. Of those, we had 90% of those bills bipartisanly supported. 57% were unanimously supported.
Wow.
So we get good bipartisan support on most everything we do. We had 10 categories or 10 priority issues that we wanted to move that I figured I'd kind of touch on, because we may or may not have talked about them over the past 8 weeks.
Right.
First one was Senate Bill 1, and that really deals with updates to the foster care program. A lot of the Department of Child Services complaints we've heard about, and things that have caused costs within that agency to skyrocket is how they've been handling foster care kids. Kids are in and out of placements, but opening up access to prioritization for family members to take those foster kids, or if they've been in foster care, go back to their parent family and then go back into foster care, back to the family that they were with before, to try to create stability within that child's life. Mm-hmm. and requiring Department of Child Services to prioritize on what's in the best interest of the child, not on, their priority the last 10 years has been reunification. Well, sometimes reunification of that family is not in the best interest of the child. So really kind of, shifting the priorities and what's in the best interest of the kid. And helping foster parents when they get to court, giving them more input, because right now judges really don't have to take foster parent input into that discussion process, which is unfortunate.
And that's an important part of that child's life.
Absolutely,
yes.
Absolutely, can be the most stable part of their their livelihood. So, a second big issue that we continue to work on is the opioid addiction problem, and we had three parts of that are prevention, treatment, and tougher penalties. So we had Senate Bill 141 that puts some the Office of Opioid Treatment Providers rules on dispensing synthetic substitutes or things that are partial opioids, treatment programs to increase the grant funding for people in opioid addiction problems. Senate Bill 162 I had that starts people in alternative treatment programs rather than opioids, and then Senate Bill 519 that enhances penalties for people who are trafficking in opioids. So really, we always look at it as you got to have all three parts, treatment, the original accessibility to the product, and toughening penalties on folks that are trafficking it. Couple of issues we did that were teacher and school related that passed out of the Senate. Senate Bill 362 increases the tax credit. This is not a tax deduction, it's actually a credit on what they owe in state taxes for teachers who buy supplies for their classroom. Currently they can have a $100 tax credit on their income taxes. We increased that to $500. I think the average teacher across the state spends somewhere between $200 and $300 of their own money each year, and the $100 tax credit wasn't covering that cost, so going to raise it to $500 to let teachers get reimbursed for the supplies they buy for their classrooms. Senate Bill 127 allows schools to have a property tax referendum that can be dealing strictly with school safety measures, either to hire resource officers for every school building if they need to, training of teachers in safety processes, hardening of the school with securities, locks, bulletproof glass, all of that. So allow them you can have a capital building project if you're going to build new buildings, and school safety enhancements could be part of that. But if you didn't have a building project you needed to do, and all you wanted to do was fund school safety measures to get your school security higher. Senate Bill 127 would allow schools to do that. School bus safety, Senate Bill 2. This past school year, there was 3 kids in one family that got hit crossing the street, from somebody who ran a school bus arm. And Senate Bill 2 toughens the penalties for people who blow through a school bus arm, and also requires schools to look at their routing of kids, and when they're on a state highway, anything possible to do to structure those routes to where the kids don't have to cross the other lane. I mean that they're approaching the kid to where they open the door and they just end the bus. So sometimes it might not physically be possible, but if it's at all doable, they need to run their routes to prevent kids from having to cross the road. Targeted tax relief for small business owners, Senate Bill 233. Currently, if you have a small business or in-home business, if you have value of your desks, your computers, they call it business personal property, of less than $20,000, you don't have to pay any business personal property, for that first $20,000 of equipment and assets. We're going to raise that to $40,000. That'll be about a $4 million savings to the 28,000 small business owners that that currently use that deduction, and that money will go normally right back into their businesses to support the business or support their family's income. Senate Bill 460, my broadband right-of-way access bill, to try to help tackle the unserved rural communities with access to broadband, getting broadband companies access to that right-of-way without paying a bunch of extra fees to NDOT or DNR or anybody who sometimes tries to charge right-of-way access. Senate Bill 460 would eliminate that process. So it should help streamline the process of getting broadband out to our rural customers. Another one of my bills was Senate Bill 552 that updates the casino laws in our state. There's currently two riverboats on Lake Michigan in Gary, and they're wanting to develop that area for an intermodal site. They've got a 14,000-foot stretch where they can bring in rail cars without having to decouple them, and a barge unloading facility. That's the optimal place for that to be developed. But we've got 2 boats there that are probably not in the most prime location for gaming anyway. We would part of that bill, one would move within the city limits of Gary, and the other one would move to Terre Haute. And then it just does some other structural changes to to allow for the Terre Haute location to allow not only the guy who owns the license now, but to allow the other casino operators the ability to bid on that location for that Terre Haute relocation. So opens that up to competition. Amended in Senator Ford's bill that dealt with sports betting as part of that, and that bill passed 38-11 this week in the Senate and is off to the House. Senate Bill 516 authorizes agricultural production of industrial hemp. Kentucky has that legislation set up now, and this past year the U.S. Farm Bill had legalization for all states to grow to hemp. They declassified it. It used to be considered in the same category as marijuana. I mean, they're in the same plant family, but they're not, they're not the same product. I mean, hemp doesn't have the THC levels in it that, and for it to be classified as hemp, it has to be under 0.3% THC. And then there were some other parameters that the federal law, stipulated that you have covered. So Senate Bill 516 passed by a pretty strong margin in the, I think, like 45 to 5 in the Senate this past week, and is off to the House. And the federal government said you can either adopt your regulations with the kind of list of parameters that they need to make sure have covered, or they'll write your regulations for you. One way or another, you're going to have it. You can either craft your own, or we'll send you your rules. So we thought it's always better to do our own. And it's got a lot of protections in there for oversight by law enforcement. State police can inspect the growing operations at any time. They'll have to be GPS coordinates mapped out, that the Alcohol Tobacco Commission has a full list of anybody that's growing it, and a lot of oversight on making sure somebody doesn't try to grow marijuana in the middle of a hemp field or grow marijuana in place of hemp. So
is the hemp for rope or for CBD?
Either.
Oh, okay.
Either they take the seeds to make the CBD oil, they take the fiber to make rope or fibers, in place of fiberglass for car panels, or the fiber itself has a lot of industrial uses. We import millions of tons of hemp from China and Canada today in Indiana, and why not let our farmers here grow it? The terrain and geography and temperatures in southern Indiana are suited ideally for growing hemp, and back 75 years ago, it probably was a very popular crop for farmers to grow. And then the 10th item that we covered last week was the bias crimes bill, Senate Bill 12. I'll call it number 11, that I feel is probably equally as important as the other top 10, that we probably talked about a month or so back with Senate Bill 551. I'll call it the 11th of the 10.
Yeah.
That really enhances protection for people that are victims of crime, people that are sex abuse victims as children, domestic battery victims, and really enhances their protections and their rights, and protects the citizens across the state with some of the sex registry penalties that we have in there for people who fail to register as a sex offender. So good, strong bills that we passed out of the Senate the first half. Monday, we start the process of working on House bills in the Senate and Senate bills in the House, and my first hearing is set for 8:30 Tuesday morning on one of my bills. So it begins.
Yeah. So, and you, in the top 10, you've got many significant bills this year.
Three of the top 10. So, yeah. And I'll say 4 of the top 11. Yeah. So felt pretty good about that. I mean, they were tough bills to put together. Several of them were, had a lot of moving parts. Even but Senate Bill 460, working with the telecommunication people and NDOT, to make sure, I crafted a bill that, NDOT felt was fair and reasonable. And the telecommunication providers felt, gave them the tools they needed. Sometimes you get people who really don't get along too well to come together on a piece of legislation. It takes a lot of work. I mean, another one, not on the list, but I think is pretty significant, is updates to the physical therapists' laws, and here again, taking input from medical providers of all medical trades and the physical therapists, and getting a comprehensive bill that, to this point, pretty well everybody agrees is on the right track. So, and then I've got 11 House bills that I've been asked to carry during the second half of session as well. So
you're going to be a busy
man. I'll be busy.
Yeah. So really, then we're done in each of the parts of the House to passing their bills. So now you get the House bills, they get the Senate bills, and then we see where it goes from there.
Yeah. And I think our statistics had 201 House bills that passed out of about 750 that were filed. So. At the end of the day, we'll probably have, normally it's around 200 to 250 bills in total that pass in a normal long session. So a lot of these bills will either get combined into...
I was going to say, how many are duplicates or will come together?
I would say, 10 to 20% are probably duplicate issues where, a House member and Senate member both filed, the same bill. And I've got bills that got merged into House bills already. I had 2 of my bills that I filed that somebody else put in a House bill. I'm okay with that. If the issue gets taken care of, then I'm fine. I don't have a big pride of authorship. I just like to see the results get done.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for coming in.
My pleasure.
And we want to point out that tomorrow morning, Saturday morning, at the C10 building at the campus of Vincennes University, Jasper, will be the legislative breakfast by the Jasper Chamber of Commerce. Senator Messmer will be there, as well as probably Senator Houchin and Representatives Bartles and Lindauer will be there. Should be. Depends on how schedules go, but it's a good chance for you to listen to what they say and to ask questions.
Yep.
All right. See you tomorrow morning.
We'll be there. Look forward to it.
Thank you for joining us for WJTS Inform. Our guest has been State Senator Mark Messmer. Thank you for joining us, WJTS. We're local people watching local people.